Hello everyone, welcome back to my lessons and thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing and I would really appreciate it. So today we're doing human reproduction and we'll be doing things differently. We'll be doing lesson questions and answers. I hope you enjoy it. Now let's look at the important things in human reproduction. You need to know male reproductive system, female reproductive system, be able to label them and give the functions of those parts. You need to know puberty, you need to know menstrual cycle, hormonal control of the menstrual cycle, and you need to know the development of the fetus. Now, if you know all these things, you'll be able to answer the questions under the topic of human reproduction. And in this lesson, I cover all these things. Male reproductive system, we have seminal vesicle here, which is a gland that produces a nutrient-rich fluid that provides energy for the sperm cells. We have corpus gland, which produces mucus that helps with the movement of the sperm cells. We have scrotum, which is a skin sac that protects the testes and hold the testes outside the body at a temperature that is 2 degrees Celsius below 37 degrees Celsius. This is the best temperature for the production of the sperm. Now we have the prostate gland, which produces alkaline fluid that neutralizes the acids produced in the vagina, which would kill the sperm cells. We have the sperm duct, which transports the sperms from the epididymis to the urethra. And we have the urethra, which transports the semen and the urine out of the body. We have epididymis, sperm cells mature and are stored here. Lastly, we have the testis, which produces sperm cells and the hormone testosterone. Now let's look at the hormone testosterone. It is important for the development of secondary sexual characteristics such as beard, pubic hair, deep voice, and muscular body. It also stimulates maturation of the sperm cells. It is secreted by what? It is secreted by the testes. Now, spermatogenesis, which is a process whereby the sperms are formed, it takes place in the testes. And it says that under the influence of testosterone, a diploid cell in the seminiferous or testes undergo meiosis to form haploid sperm cells. Now you'll be asked in your exam question paper to state the spermatogenesis, and this is what you should write. Now let's look at the sperm cells, the sperm that is produced during the spermatogenesis. We have the head here. This is acrosome. We have nucleus inside here. We have the neck, middle piece which contains mitochondrion. We have plasma membrane and the tail. Now let's look at the functions of this. We have acrosome, which contains enzyme to digest wall of egg cell for fertilization. We have the nucleus that contains 23 chromosomes. We have mitochondria, which provides energy for swimming. We have the tail, which is used for swimming. Now you need to know all these things. Now let's look at the questions under the male reproductive system. Now it says that the diagram below shows the parts of the male reproductive system. The first question, identify part C. Let's look at part C. Part C is sperm duct. Now let's look at part F. Part F is scrotum. Part H is penis. Now let's look. Number 2, give the letter a name of the part that stores sperm temporarily. The answer is epididymis, which is D. Transport both semen and urine is the urethra, G. Produces testosterone, E. Testis. Give the letters of the 2 parts that contribute to the formation of semen. We have A, B, and E. Now let's move on to the female reproductive system. You need to be able to label the female reproductive system and give the functions of all these parts. We have the fallopian tube, which connects the ovaries to the uterus, transport the egg cell from the ovary. It is a site of fertilization. Fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube. You'll be asked this question in your biological terms. We have ovary, which produces egg cells, secrete progesterone and estrogen. Now let's look at the vagina. Receives the penis and semen during sexual intercourse. It is the passage through which the baby is born. The uterus carries the embryo and the fetus during pregnancy. Endometrium, inner lining of the uterus, place where embryo implants and the placenta forms. Now let's look at the cervix, the lower narrow part of the uterus. It stretches to allow the baby through during childbirth. Now let's move on to human egg cell, which is produced during the process of oogenesis. Remember, in the male reproductive system, a human sperm cell is produced during the process of spermatogenesis. Now, oogenesis, the diploid cell in the ovary undergo mitosis, meaning that the process of oogenesis takes place in the ovaries. You need to take note of this. To form numerous follicles under the influence of FSH, one undergo meiosis to form haploid ovum. Now you need to know all this because you'll be asked in your exam paper. Let's look at the questions under the female reproductive system. It says that the structure below represents a part of the female reproductive system. The first question, identify part D. Now let's look at D. The answer is cervix. State one function of part A. Part A is the fallopian tube. It is the site of fertilization, or it is where the fertilization occurs. Now describe the process of oogenesis as it occurs in part B. You see, they say that they want you to describe the process of oogenesis that we described a few seconds ago. Now the answer is the diploid cell in the ovary undergo mitosis to form numerous follicles. Under the influence of FSH, one cell undergoes meiosis to form a haploid ovum. Now this is how you should write it. The next question, state one way in which structure C is suited for its function during pregnancy. Structure C, let's look at structure C. So the answer is that it is a hollow organ. It has muscular wall. It has blood-rich lining, or the endometrium. Now let's look at the last question. A person undergoes a surgical operation to remove part B. Part B is ovary on both sides. Explain why this person will not menstruate. The answer is that no follicle will develop, no estrogen will be produced, and no progesterone will be produced. Therefore, the endometrium will not develop. Now let's move on to the next set of questions. The diagram below represents the structure of an ovum and a sperm. An ovum which is produced during the process of oogenesis, and a sperm that is produced during the process of spermatogenesis. Identify part A. Part A is jelly layer. Part B is cytoplasm. Part C on the sperm is the acrosome. Now name the process involving meiosis that leads to the formation of an ovum. I told you an ovum is produced during the process of oogenesis. Write down the letter of the part of the sperm that enters the ovum. It's D. Write down the letters, two letters of two parts that enable the sperm to move towards the ovum. What helps the sperm to be able to move towards the ovum? We have E, the E which is the mitochondrion, the middle piece. We have F, the tail that helps the sperm to swim. Now let's look at puberty. Puberty is the period in humans in which they experience physical changes in their bodies in order to be capable for sexual production. Puberty in males, stimulated by the testosterone, start of the production of sperm cells. Growth of pubic hair, facial hair, and body hair, development of muscles and deepening of the voice. In females, stimulated by the estrogen, there's growth of female sex organs, the start of menstrual cycle and production of ova, growth of pubic hair, growth and development of breasts, and widening of hips. Now the questions that could arise under this puberty could be what is puberty, as well as what is stimulated by the what is puberty stimulate what stimulates puberty in males is testosterone, in females is estrogen, and also these things start of production of sperms, growth, pubic hair. They could ask you those questions. Now let's look at menstrual cycle. Let's look at number 1 to 7. This should be our start. New follicles develop and secrete estrogen, right? Where? In the ovaries. Now let's look at in the ovaries from day 8 to 13. After the new follicles after they are developed and they secreted the estrogen, the mature Graafian follicle develops from the what? From the follicle. The Graafian follicle moves to the edge of the ovary and it secretes estrogen. Now what happens in the uterus when the estrogen is secreted? The estrogen stimulates the endometrium to become thicker and develop more blood vessels and glands. In day 14, Graafian follicle bursts to release an egg cell. The process is called ovulation. Take note of this. Let's look at from day 15 to 22. The Graafian follicle becomes a corpus luteum that secretes progesterone. Now, when progesterone is secreted by the Graafian follicle, what happens in the uterus? Progesterone stimulates the endometrium to become even thicker and to develop more blood vessels and ready to receive an embryo if an egg cell is fertilized. Where does fertilization take place? In the fallopian tube. If fertilization does not take place, the corpus luteum shrinks and stops secreting progesterone. If fertilization takes place, the corpus luteum remains active in the ovary and continue to secrete progesterone. No more follicles develop in the ovaries, no menstruation take place. And if fertilization does not take place, the lining breaks down and is released as menstruation. Now let's look at the hormonal control of the menstrual cycle. Now we have 4 hormones. We have FSH, we have LH, progesterone, and estrogen during the menstrual cycle. Now the FSH, which is secreted by the pituitary gland, it stimulates the development of the follicle. Now the follicle is developing to become a Graafian follicle containing an egg cell. Now what happens to that follicle? The follicle secretes estrogen. What happens? The estrogen thickens the endometrium. Now we have the LH, which is also secreted by the pituitary gland, which stimulates ovulation during day 14, and it stimulates the development of the corpus luteum after ovulation. Now what happens is that progesterone, after corpus luteum is developed, progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum. Progesterone prepares the endometrium fully for pregnancy. Now let's look at the questions under this hormonal control. We have contraceptives are used to prevent pregnancy. Some females use pills that contain progesterone. In one packet, there would be 28 pills, of which 21 contain concentrations of progesterone according to the day in the cycle, and the 7 remaining contain no progesterone. A female has to take 1 pill daily at the same time and given sequence as shown below. Now here, they're showing us pills. Now these pills from Monday to Sunday down here, they have progesterone, and this ones here, they don't have progesterone. Now the graph below shows the difference in the progesterone levels during a menstrual cycle of a woman taking contraceptive pills and a woman not taking contraceptive pills. Now let's look at the questions. The estrogen levels between day 8 and 22 will remain low in the woman who takes contraceptive pills. Explain why this is the case. Now, the high levels of progesterone in the pills will inhibit the secretion of what? FSH from the pituitary gland. No follicle will develop, hence no estrogen will be secreted. Now, let's look at the second question. Ovulation took place on day 14 in the woman who is not taking the contraceptive pills. Explain the evidence in the graph that supports this conclusion. Now let's look at the graph. The increase in progesterone level indicates that the corpus luteum has been formed. Now that's your answer. Let's look at the last question. Suggest one reason for including pills with no hormones in the contraceptive pill packet, so that women will stay in the habit of taking pill every day and they will not forget to take the progesterone containing pills. Or the answer could be that to allow menstruation to occur. Now let's look at the development of the fetus. We have ovulation, which occurs during day 14 during the menstrual cycle. We have fertilization, which occurs in the fallopian tube. We have zygote, morula, blastula, embryo, fetus. Now let's look at, you need to take note of this biological terms. In the ovary, a metrographian follicle bursts, right, usually on day 14 of the menstrual cycle and releases an egg cell. This process is called ovulation. You need to take note of this ovulation. You might be asked in the biological terms. Fertilization takes place high up in the fallopian tube. This is important. The egg cell containing 23 chromosomes and a sperm cell containing 23 chromosomes, they fuse to form a zygote. A zygote is important. Zygote divides by mitosis. Take note of this, not meiosis. They might ask you in the question paper. To form morula. Morula, which is a solid ball of cells. They might ask you in the question paper, a solid ball of cells. You should know that it's morula, then blastocyst. You should know that this one is a hollow ball of cells. And finally, an embryo as it moves down the fallopian tube. It takes about 5 to 7 days for the embryo to reach the uterus. In the uterus, the embryo settles on the endometrium, sinks into it, embedding itself to the endometrium. Now, this process is called implantation. After implantation, the embryo produces a finger-like structures called villi from the outer membrane of the embryo, which is known as the chorion. The villi grow into the tissue of the uterus to form placenta. Placenta is attached by the embryo by the umbilical cord, and the umbilical cord has 2 umbilical arteries which carry deoxygenated blood from the embryo towards the placenta, and 1 umbilical vein which carries oxygenated blood from the placenta to the embryo. Take note of this. The embryo is enclosed in a fluid-like sac called amnion. The fluid is called amniotic fluid. Take note of this as well. After about 8 weeks, the embryo develops structures such as limbs and all the organs of the body. Now it is called the fetus. And then the gestation period between fertilization and the birth of the baby usually lasts a period of 9 months. Now let's look at the questions under this. It says that the diagram below represents the sequence of events that may take place inside the human female reproductive system. The first question, identify the process taking place at 1 in the diagram above. That is fertilization. As you can see, the sperm there and the ovum. State the type of cell division that take place at 2 in the diagram below. I told you from zygote to a solid ball of cells, that is mitosis, not meiosis. The next question, name 2 functional extraembryonic membranes that are produced by structure C. The answer is chorion and amnion. We have the next question, identify the stage of development indicated by A. A is zygote, B is morula, C is blastula or blastocyst. Name the part of female reproductive system where events in the diagram usually take place. The answer is the fallopian tube. Give the chromosome number of cell at A if the cell is going to develop into a child with Down syndrome. The answer is 47. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and come back for the next lesson. Thank you.